Well, we all thought Ferrari was going to be the next super team in the making. But it seems like Aston Martin is the one coming in with the Hail Mary to secure Adrian Newey's services. This rumour going on for a while, but now it seemingly is going to stick.
Can we just assume that money had something to do with it, Law? Well, I mean, if you say that, well, you'd be absolutely right.
Reportedly, another figure has been bandied about with Aston Martin, aiming to secure the services of the designer for a total of $25 million a year for 4 years, as reported by Italian publication Autosprint, with their revealing publication. Supposedly, Aston Martin and Adrian Newey will break cover with this announcement in September, which is exactly the same time that Red Bull is going to be announcing their new management structure, and also Ferrari reporting their new technical structure as well. It just seems like September is the place to be. And even though Aston Martin has somewhat sidestepped the rumours about Adrian Newey, it didn't outright deny them. Effectively, it was the team in a press statement just going, I mean, we're flattered that we're the centre of attention and the object of people's desires, but stop it. Oh, you're making me blush. They still use the speculation to make it look like they're going to be really good in time for 2026. And if this ends up being accurate, then Aston Martin will be emulating what Ferrari themselves were doing 30 years prior with the acquisition of Michael Schumacher and company for 1996.
Well, I mean, if they want to try and emulate that perfectly, all they've got to do now is just get the services of Max Verstappen. I mean, I hope you got your checkbook ready, Toto, because I think you're about to head toward a bidding war.
The article then goes on to say that Adrian Newey's enthusiasm for the project consists of the coming together of high-profile names in Andy Cowell from Mercedes' Power Unit division, Enrico Cardile from Ferrari as Newey's partner in crime in theory, as well as working closely with the established dealings of Dan Fallows. There are also the partnerships regarding Honda and Aramco to take into consideration as well. Adrian Newey saying that you really need to be with the best of the best, and considering how successful Honda has been in recent years, and in theory still is, that is not something to turn your nose up at. And of course Aramco, it being involved in Saudi Arabia, they are going to do anything in which to win. And especially with the Honda connection, it's something that Adrian Newey is familiar with. He's aware of how to build the car around the power unit, or at least help design it. When you step back to look at all of this is making more and more sense. Adrian Newey isn't expected to be the sole designer of future Aston Martins, something which he hasn't done for the past several years at Red Bull, due to the fact that he wishes to make other things aside from F1 cars these days. He's managed to actually take a look around the factory in private, having gotten to know the inner workings of the brand new tech, all of which he can work alongside his trusty pencil and paper. Even though Red Bull, Pierre Vacher and Christian Horner have been quick to try and just downplay the significance of Adrian Newey and make his workflow look all fuddy-duddy and outdated and inconvenient, I don't think Papa Stroll will pay any attention to that. He is going to do anything to make sure that Adrian signs on the dotted line. If he wants to work with a pencil and paper, he can do that. If he wants to paint his wall baby blue, he can do that, which he did do, by the way, according to his book at McLaren, which really went against the likes of Ron Dennis, who wanted everything grey and lifeless.
Because I think the people at Aston Martin are just going to look at the form book of Adrian Newey and just go like, yeah, whatever he does, his eccentricities, it brings results, so okay, why not?
Although it is wise to point out that he did cut his F1 teeth with Leighton House March, and he was able to give McLaren a couple of bloody noses over the time he was there before Williams snapped him up. Also, it stands to reason with Newey's belief that if you want to win, you can't be fussy with the purse strings, nor can you be too limiting in terms of control, which might be why Ferrari decided not to work with him ultimately, according to reports, but we'll get to that in a moment. When you couple all of this news alongside the rumours going around that Ferrari and Red Bull are bleeding employees to other teams, whilst McLaren and Mercedes are able to shore up their own divisions, Mercedes especially having suffered their own brain drain, but thankfully they're now getting on top of that, it does make you feel that Aston Martin is one of the stronger teams at the moment. We hear about Sauber and Audi recruiting people, that in of itself is impressive, but Aston Martin seems to be really hiring the big guns. And even though we've been quick to forget the success of 2023, the team does have the tools in which to make things work. And most importantly, they are not Toyota. Toyota had plenty of cash, it had plenty of resources in which to make things happen. But the difference here is that Papa Stroll has experience now of what Formula One is and what makes it tick, and who is actually good in it. So he is going to use all of his resources possible to hire the best people who know F1 inside and out. That is exactly the opposite of what Toyota did. They thought that the Toyota way, the way they did things everywhere else, would work in Formula One. They didn't pick people who had experience in the sport, and they just thought it would work anyway. And it didn't. And it's a shame really, because they did gather experience, and by 2005, they were actually pretty good. And then they made some really boneheaded decisions come 2006 in the V8 era, and it just all completely flatlined from there. And right now, I think Aston Martin has a really good solid case for doing well in 2026, because it's quite clear at this point that you really need to be on your toes when it comes to these regulations. I would say that a better comparison to the 2026 changes are the 2014 changes, where we saw a fundamental change in who was in charge of the running order. Another thing which makes me less worried about the team's future is that I don't really care what happens to them next year, because they're currently in a holding pattern period until Honda finishes up their partnership with Red Bull and Aramco comes in wholesale with their synthetic fuels. I don't think we should really expect much from Aston Martin in 2025, because it's just going to be treading water. It's their last year with Mercedes as their technical partners and their power unit suppliers. It's just going to try and get things consolidated, ready to go for 2026. So I really wouldn't be surprised if we see Aston Martin just sort of coast, maybe hoping for 4th place in the Constructors if they're lucky, probably just wanting to hold on to 5th place for a 3rd year in a row. Possibly not wanting to fall behind the likes of Haas and Williams and Racing Bulls, what have you, maybe a resurgent Alpine, but everyone's going to be looking to 2026, so I think they might actually hold on to 5th place realistically, because other teams are going to be looking over their shoulder and just go, "Oh, what's that? Oh no, the 2026 cars are scary." And believe me, with a certain Spaniard amongst your ranks, it's going to be a long and painful year. Fernando Alonso has plenty of experience of being at teams where there is a lot of hope and promise, and then a period of malaise, slowness, and a lack of progression. His 4 years at McLaren are notable for that, and we've heard the full force of Alonso raging against a team which had no idea on how to resolve their lack of pace, and basically blaming Honda for their woes. I have absolutely no sympathy for the people in charge there at the time. They blamed Honda for all of their problems, and then come 2018 when they get Renault power, they then realise, oh, it turns out that the car might have had something to do with it too, and we shouldn't have necessarily blamed Honda for absolutely everything that went wrong, and now we look incredibly silly. And what makes this even more frustrating for Alonso is that this is the perfect opportunity in which to take a couple of pot shots toward Red Bull. He is frustrated with the fact that there is a golden opportunity to be had here, and Aston Martin aren't doing anything with it. They are not striking when the Titans are down. They are just basically trying to hold station where they are. All of their upgrades, they are one of the most developed teams on the grid this year, and all they've done is get back to exactly where they started the season. They've not kicked on. They have the same fundamental upgrade woes that they had last year in Canada, and now they've just managed to get themselves back to where they're supposed to be, which is fighting for 8th. Wow. If Red Bull has a crack in their armour, Alonso thinks, make the most of it to scalp some points, but the only crack they have at the moment is, well, this guy. I feel bad for Alonso in a way, I really do. He never really got to taste success at McLaren. His best was like 5th place in the fastest lap in Hungary, and then he comes to Aston Martin, he immediately gets podiums, he has his best season in over a decade, so naturally, he senses a victory. Number 33. He wants more. 2024 was a major reality check for him, and in my honest opinion, it was the next phase kicking in Operation Let's Make Lance Stroll Look Good. Buying your way to the top and having examples right next to your boy to show that he is making progress, we are honest, believe us, it's true. Because right now, Alonso's in a funk, he's not quite sure exactly what's going on, whereas Lance Stroll is actually competent compared to him, which is really strange to say. So now, Aston Martin can say, Mike Crack especially, is that, oh, Lance, our boy, is actually holding his own against now 2 multiple world champions. And that's got to count for something, right? It's not every day that somebody goes up against Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso and lives to tell the tale. And to top it all off for Alonso, if he wants to make the most of Adrian Newey's influence, he's not going to be getting that in 2025. If Aston Martin secure the surfaces of Newey, he's going to be put to work on the 2026 car. 2025 can go and hang. It can be Dan Fallows' last hurrah. So it means that Alonso will be 45 by the time he actually gets into the AMR 26 designed by Adrian Newey. And even though he might want to stay there, the hunger might be there, age might make it a compromised experience, and Lance Stroll might be designed around it completely. And then the operation might then kick on to its next phase, and then it might kick on to the final phase, in which they bring Max Verstappen in to go against Lance Stroll. And then Lance Stroll can actually do better than Max Verstappen, and then they can go, oh, look at that Lance, our boy can hold his own against Max Verstappen, and oh dear. I dread to think what will happen there. Max will just tear him a new one.
Which is why me and my little friend seriously doubt that actually will happen. Can you really imagine Stroll and Verstappen working together? I mean, Verstappen doesn't often care about his teammates because he can leave them for dust, but I think that'll be a bridge too far. So I haven't got anything else to go on that rumour, so we're not going to be really talking about it. We'll skip the Verstappen stuff.
But wait, Law, surely the Ferrari deal is done and dusted, right? They wanted the best of the best. Yes, that's very true. They have the desire to do the same as Aston Martin in securing the best talent, and it all looks set to be Newey going there to form the super team that Ferrari had back in the late 90s and early 2000s. But from the way I've seen it, the further that was once there at the beginning of the season to get Newey to Ferrari, all the rumours surrounding secret talks in London between Vasseur and Newey that was so rampant and constant have sort of died out. And another article that Autosprint put out really made me stop and think, and of course, it all makes sense now. Adrian Newey goes against everything Ferrari stands for, the basic principles, the soul of the team. I thought it would be down to Adrian asking for too much money that would mean the dream wouldn't happen, but it turns out it's got something to do with the collective of the Tifosi. Even though you could argue that Ferrari has always had one figurehead within the team, or a select few, such as the powerhouse of Schumacher, Brawn, Byrne and Todt, they were very much aware of the bigger picture, that you work for Ferrari. Ferrari itself is an ethereal entity, its legacy going back to the days of Enzo Ferrari. No person is bigger than the Scuderia. Autosprint reckons that Newey's courting of Ferrari has failed not down to money, exactly as it was initially believed to have been, due to the company's CEO Benedetto Vigna balking at the price tag, which poured cold water on the deal initially, but it was down to the demands which Newey seemingly came with. And even though Autosprint says that Ferrari did approach Adrian Newey, Piero Ferrari being one of the main instigators, and John Elkann supporting it, because obviously he wants to make anything happen, and then talks going to Fred Vasseur on the granular level to see how he would work on the day-to-day, ultimately, it seems that Fred Vasseur was the one to block the deal from happening, and it all comes down to a position of power. Now, Adrian Newey might have gone for a power play. Time was called on the proceedings, perhaps not to do with the price tag, but the bridal train that came with it. What does that mean? Well, that's in reference to a wedding dress, which at times comes with a train, which is much longer than the dress itself. And sometimes it can be really long. Ferrari seemingly were expecting maybe a page or two of requests when they come to Ferrari, but no. Apparently, they must have gotten a whole tome of the demands that Adrian Newey required. He was asking to have full control over who was hired, fired, promoted, demoted, future technical partners, as well as other significant decisions, which Vasseur is meant to be responsible for. And Autosport made a really good analysis about the language that was being used around Newey. Back in the day, just a few months ago, they were really intrigued about Newey. They weren't necessarily denying everything entirely. But come May and June, it sort of grew a little bit more frosty, saying that, oh, Newey's good, but there are others who could be good as well, and that John Elkann was talking about the group being more important than the individual, that no one person is larger than the car company, and that seems to have remained true. And all the greats that have been around Formula One have been very keen on that, and it really does give me some sense of perspective that Lewis Hamilton is fully aware of the importance of Ferrari in the relationship. Not Charles Leclerc, not Michael Schumacher, not Jean Todt, all these names were aware that if you represent the Scuderia, you are part of that group. You are not bigger than it. Because this is all really fascinating, that maybe the relationship between Lewis and Ferrari will work out, that Lewis doesn't think that he's above them, and that it might actually be relatively harmonious. But there might be some other things in the pipeline as well which could derail the entire thing, but it seems to have gone well talks with Hamilton than it did for Newey. Much better. At first, I was shocked that Ferrari would pass on Newey, but hearing this now, I kind of understand. Ferrari were not prepared to relinquish control from the traditional model, and they never will. Which is why the spotlight's gone away from Adrian Newey going to the Scuderia, and instead, it's another technical director, one that was cast out from his previous team, and now might find solace at the Scuderia, that being Mike Elliot. He might be announced in September to be the replacement of Enrico Cardile, off the back of Diego Tondi being promoted to being the head of aerodynamics and one of the key people in charge of Project 677, that being the 2025 Ferrari car. Now I bet you're probably thinking, what? Mike Elliot, the guy who failed so hard with the Zero Pods that Toto basically sacked him or asked him to resign, that Lewis Hamilton condemned it and said the W13 and 14 were the worst cars he's ever drove in F1? Yes, that guy, but I think recency bias has been really harsh on the man. He was not a new hire of Mercedes. He worked with them for a really long time, during the good times of 2014 through 20. and maybe the 2022 concept was just simply not one of his best ideas. After all, Newey's had plenty of duffers in his career. One never even saw a racing lap in anger. Ferrari will be fully aware as to the zero-pod concept not working with Mercedes, but there are plenty of people who have come from Mercedes who are high up in the organisation now in Fred's brand new team that could easily support and justify Mike Elliot being there. Not just Lewis Hamilton, of course, because he'll be fully aware of the achievements that Mike was able to bring to the cars that he won world titles with. But there's also Loic Serra, and there's of course Jerome D'Ambrosio, who was meant to be the successor to Toto Wolff, who has now become the deputy of Fred Vasseur. These are key people who could easily say that, hey, Mike's actually really good. Don't mind what happened in 2022. He'll have learnt from his mistakes and they'll easily be able to think around the problem, and Mike Elliot will work with the people who already work with Ferrari and come up with a solution. I think that Mike could be a real dark horse here, and he'll be fully aware of what is expected of him, that he is part of the organisation, part of the team, part of Ferrari. He won't have smoke blown up his bottom or anything like that, and he will just do his job, and he might do his job pretty well.
Sure, okay, it's not as exciting as them for hiring Adrian Newey, it's quite boring in comparison, but sometimes boring gets you results.
As for Newey and Aston Martin, I seriously think this is going to happen based on this report from an Italian publication. Usually they tend to be relatively close to the truth, or at least point in the right direction for discussion when it comes to matters of Ferrari. And also the basic principle of what Adrian Newey expects from a team. Newey wants the world. He wants free reign. Him to be able to make any decision that he wants, and Papa Stroll right now is in the business of hiring anybody he can, the best people in the business, and allowing them to do what they need to do to ensure that Aston Martin succeed. He will see the benefits of allowing them to have full control and have faith in them to be able to use their experience and their success and their previous good work to the best and fullest. And the team's Saudi-backed investors and partners such as Honda will not mind at all about how much power Adrian wants on the day-to-day. They want to win first and foremost. Honda made it clear they want to be fighting for the constructors in their first year together with Aston Martin. Now, as far as they're concerned, Adrian's form book speaks for itself. So many world titles. He's become the most successful F1 designer that has ever lived. That is proof positive enough for that team to just go, hey, you know what, $100 million for 4 years? Yeah, that's fine, whatever. Aston Martin and Ferrari are not strapped for cash. Money is not the issue here. They would be prepared to pay Adrian Newey. But the difference here is that Aston Martin does not have a legacy or traditions that get in the way of Adrian Newey being there. They are not going to be turning up their nose of Adrian Newey's big bucket list of demands. They're just going to go, fine, have what you want. Whereas Ferrari is just going to go, no, you are not bigger than Ferrari. And Fred will just go, no. And also, Mike Crack is not exactly intimidating as a team principal. He seems more than happy to follow the party line, unlike Fred Vasseur, who has plenty of integrity and now's to be aware of the house he is living in presently. Then again, there is the small fact of, well, who's going to pay for Newey's presence then? Surely he's going to be coming under the cost cap as one of the 3 most paid up people in terms of developing the car. That's quite a valid concern. Teams only get $135 million a year. And for 2025, if Adrian Newey does turn up, it might be eating into the budget in how to develop the AMR 25 for next year. And if the current budget remained the same for 2026, I would be legitimately concerned thinking that Aston Martin will be cutting corners. But, supposedly, the new Concord agreement says that the cost cap will be increased to $220 million a year, up from $135. That is a very big jump. And even though I'm concerned that some smaller teams might find it difficult to get up to that target, unless they actually go back to their outside investors and go, please sir, may we have some more? I feel like Aston Martin will be jubilant. This will be music to their ears. Oh goody! This means we can put more money toward Adrian Newey and we can have a really good car and everything will be really hunky-dory.
And come on, let's be real. I think this is going to be ratified because you seriously think every single team will suddenly go, what, a bigger budget? No thank you.
Their investments to the factory have already been paid for, which was lumped into their capex spend, which all teams have gotten. They can pay for him, sure, and yeah, it might mean that 2025 is somewhat compromised in terms of cost cap spend, but that might be a sacrifice which the team is willing to take to have the most successful F1 designer that has ever lived. Now, instead of having the most successful F1 designer that has ever lived, Ferrari seem to be settling for having the most successful F1 driver that has ever lived. Sure, these designers at Ferrari may not be big star names, but they might be really good in their field, and Ferrari will be fully aware of their abilities without the need to have major headlines written about them. And with Lewis arriving to work with Charles, it could be a pair which gets along just fine. But there are other things that Hamilton comes with which are beyond his control, which might prove to be a major headache in Maranello. Find out why presently I think Ferrari aren't quite ready yet for Lewis Hamilton in terms of the entity and brand in this video here that you can go and watch right now. And interesting times we live in, eh?